Welcome everyone. Microeconomics, the market system. This is what we'll be discussing in this presentation. So let us proceed. We will talk everything with respect to the market structures, nothing but the market structure. In fact, you will see in my subsequent slide, market structures remain more or less the constraint thing, the only constant that comes around it. But I would love to play with your imagination as to the various structure that comes around it in the market and why so. That is the primary reasons of doing with this particular presentations, right? So types of market structures and how does it influence the firm in terms of pricing? One, the supply of raw materials, the barriers to entry for that particular industry or for that particular company or for the business thereby, the efficiencies of scales and the competition that needs to be taken into consideration. Now, these are the market structure that comes around it every now and then. The pricing, I repeat, the supply. So is the power of the suppliers or the powers of the buyers as such, the barriers to entry, the efficiency, how good, viable, profitable it is, and the types of competition. Is it a severe competition? Is it a cutthroat competition? Or competition is simply missing in that particular segment altogether? So that is which will determine the market structures and how the firm encapsulates and position itself. Remember, market structure is all about the degree of competition in the industry. The higher the level of competition, the better for it, because then all our issues are ironed out altogether. You are supposed to be vying only on the credibility of cost conscious, quality conscious, and consumer conscious. So limited competition is almost a monopoly. You can do away with quality, probably. You can do away with customer preferences and complaints thereby. You can do away with the costing factors as such, the way you want to look into it, but you have to be good in certain things so that you command a monopoly in the market. And the degree of competition in between, as in between the perfect competition and a monopoly, there might be an oligopoly that comes around it. The degrees of competition that creeps in to determine what the market structures would always be around it. And this is the very essence of today's presentation. We will understand what are the various constraints, what are the various advantages, what are the various process, and why does certain firms behave in a particular market structure as the case is. So, determinants are freedom of entry and exit. Now, there might be, I have utilized a positive word called freedom. It can be a restriction of entry and restriction of exit. What are the restrictions? It can be legally restricted, probably yes, by the law of the land, that certain companies, certain company with certain fiscal background, certain technicalities might not be entertained at all by the law of the land, probably. And it can be a capital intensive in terms of restrictions. It can be resource intensive in terms of restriction. Similarly for freedom, the nature of the products is might be homogeneous. Homogeneous means almost an identical product, and differentiated product. Differentiated means it might be customized altogether. Let's say a homogeneous product would be a car which is producing nothing but a car which is all in white color or all in black color. But when we have differentiated, when we require a car but in different colors, absolutely colors to our choices as that, it's the car with different color which has been differentiated. Now, what are the controls that you have over your supply method mechanism or your output mechanism, as the case might be? What are the supply chain constraint or flexibility that is being afforded to you? Controls over the price definitely yes, and the barriers to entry thereby, as in what we are looking forward to it. The market structure comes in place. Let's say in terms of perfect competition, it is a free entry and probably free exit to everybody into the industry. So it's a very non-existent entry barriers, and so non-existent exit barrier. Homogeneous products identical, in fact so identical that consumer might get lost or probably will not figure out what are the differences thereby. Large numbers of buyers and large numbers of sellers, so plenty full of options are available for either of them. So no individual seller can influence it. It is the perfect market competitions, right? Absolutely, the market will determine who is going to rule the roost. Sellers or price takers have to accept the market price. Perfect information available to buyers and sellers, as the case might be. If you look into it, everybody is in the loop of the things, as in the know-how and how to go around it. Market structures is example of perfect competition. Markets, financial markets are stock exchanges, currency market, bond markets, agriculture. To what extent that we comes across it, and how do we go about? That is what we look forward. So financial market, stock exchange, currency market, bond market, agriculture, and to what extent this happens. Advantages of perfect competition. How do you go across it? It's a high degree of competition which helps to allocate resources to almost the most effective and the efficient usages. It's an absolute optimum utilization that requires around it. Remember, price is almost is equal to your marginal cost. In fact, marginal cost doesn't play any role, any major role. In fact, any role for that matter. Normal profit has been made over a period of long run. Firm operate at a maximum of the efficiency, and the end consumer is always in a sweet spot. And that is what is the advantage of a perfect competition. A high degree of competition, remember, is an optimum utilization of resources. Price and cost are more or less same, almost same. Normal profit in a definitively long run basis. Firm operate at a maximum efficiency, and consumer benefits. What happens in a competitive environment? Now, this is where we need to understand. It's a competitive environment, it's an idea which matters. Firm makes a short-term abnormal profit. Why? Because he launches a product with a new idea, new packaging, and so on and so forth. Other firms enter the industry to take advantages of those abnormal profit. The moment the other firms start mimicking, copying the product, yes, this abnormal profit declines and declines abruptly. Even so, supply increases, prices falls, as I said. So long run normal profit made and choice of the consumer becomes the most dominant factors, as in which company is going to benefit or become profitable in the long run. Price sufficient for the normal profits to be made, but no more, absolutely no more. And that is what an ideal competitive environment will all about be. Imperfect or monopolistic competition, there would be what we say about many sellers and many buyers. Products are as differentiated, as customized as it can be. It's an imperfect competition. It might be a monopolistic competition, relatively free entry, relatively free exit for the market to enter into that business segment. Each firms may have a tiny monopoly. Yes, people might have been or firm might have been tiny monopoly, probably geographic centric, probably centric or niche segment, as the case might be, because of the differentiation of the product. Firm has some control over the prices. Example: restaurants, professions, solicitors, etc., building firms, plasterers, plumbers, etc. Thereby, that comes across it as on when on basis. Oligopoly is a competition amongst few, absolutely very few, but there is a stringent competition within those few. Why so? Because there's a high entry to the barriers. Not everybody can afford to be in that particular business. The industry is dominated by small number of large firms. Many firms may make up the industry, and I have already said why the small numbers of the large firm, because of the high entry barrier. Product could be differentiated and can be highly differentiated. An example would be an airline industry. Not many company would be would be interested into venturing into an airline industry. So new price competition that comes around it, the price stability within the market. We will be talking about the kink demand curve. This is a wonderful thing that needs to be understood as far as microeconomics is concerned and how we look into it. And I promise you to wind up this presentation with kink demand curve. Potential for collusions thereby, and high degree of interdependence within the firm, as the case might be. This is what we are looking, since there are only few firms. And when I talk of few firms, these are few firms which are quite large in numbers or large in size as such. and these firms are looking vying for a quite of a competition, a stiff competition within the industry altogether. That is the reason why there can be a lot of interdependence also, because there are few firms, there are competition, they can actually scrub their each other's back altogether. They will help it out as on when on basis, and that is what needs to be done. Example of oligopolistic structures are supermarket, banking industry, chemicals, oil, medicinal drugs, and broadcasting industry, as the case might be. I have tried to give you certain examples which might be visible altogether. So we have supermarkets, we have banking industry, we have the chemical industry, oils, medicinal drugs, and broadcasting industry. Remember, measuring oligopoly poly is a little complicated, but definitely it can be accounted for. Remember, the proportion of the market shares accounted for the top X number of firms, maybe top two, top three, top four. Let's say five firms concentrate ratios of 50, around 80%. That means five firms will account for 80% of the market share. And the next five, rest 10, rest 20, whatever the market shares are left for, is to be divided for the next 20%. And three from comprises of 72%. Top three firm accounts for 72% of the market share, as the case might be, and that is what we are looking into it. So five firms CR ratios is around 80%, but of those five terms, the concentration ratio is of 72%. That means the next two would be only looking at 8%. So the top three firm accounts for the 72% of the market share, as a case might be, and this is what an oligopoly is all about. It. I hope everybody has understood the examples altogether. 72% of the 80% belongs to the concentration ratios of only top 3%, and that is what we are looking into it. We will be able to elaborate the king demand curve as on when on basis. Let us move from oligopoly to duopoly, where there are only two firms who have been dominating that particular segment of the market. The industry has been dominated by two large firms. Possibility of the price leader emerging. Rival will follow the price leader. Definitely, yes. It's the person which is mimicking, is the person whose competitors will actually look into the price leaders segment and probably fall into that trap, if I may call it, or fall into that pedigree, as you would love to tell it to you. Why duopoly? Because it's a high entry barrier and abnormal profits are likely as on when on basis. Abnormal profits we are talking about it. So monopoly are basically of two or three types. Pure monopoly, where there's only one large industry, one large firm. Actual monopoly is where the firm has more than 25% of the market share, and the rest of those 75% or 30 or 70% or even 60% of the market share is being hovered by the rest of the players in the market, and the rest of the players may be 10, 20, 30, 200, 300, 3000, 4000, and so on number of things. So possibly there is a dominant player who has a large chunk of the pie altogether, and then there's something called natural monopoly, which is high fixed cost. For example, the gas, the electricity supply, the water, telecommunication, the rail. Probably you have only few players working into the railway industry or the telecommunication or the gas or the electricity, and the case might be. It's absolutely very restricted. So it becomes a natural monopoly. So monopoly are three types: pure monopoly, actual monopoly, and the natural monopoly, as the case might be. So monopolies have extremely high entry barriers. Firm controls the prices or the output of the supply. Either of them, the firms will be looking into it. They have a fixed control over the as a buyer or as a seller. Absolutely. So that's the reason why this particular monopoly is been working around it. Abnormal profit in the long run, definitively yes. Possibility of price discrimination, consumer choice limited, price in excess of the market capitalization, in excess of the market share that we are looking into it, and that is what monopoly would always be talking in the actual monopoly, probably, and the real monopoly, as the case might be. So let us understand the pros and cons of monopoly. First, the advantages, it may be a national monopoly, as in with the gas, electricity, telecommunications, you name it, and we can have it. Why? Because you don't have any other suppliers as such. It might be highly regulated market, also might be. So it becomes a natural monopoly. It encourages R&D, definitely. Yes, since you have a monopoly, you don't have to worry about the business. You can further do research and development to accumulate much, not only much of experience, but build on technology that is going to reduce your cost over a period of time. So it can encourage R&D, encourage innovations as on when on basis, development of some products not likely without some guarantees of monopoly in the production. Now, this is what we all aspire for. This is the exact case of monopoly. Economics of scale can be gained. Consumer might benefit. And that is what we are looking for as an advantage. Now, whatever ever have we spoken or discussed is in an ideal situation, right? It might not be true in real life. Now, let us talk about the disadvantage. Exploitation of the consumer is basically higher prices because you have a monopoly. Nobody is there to challenge you. You can charge whatever you wish for. Potential for supply to be limited, less choice. Potential for inefficiency. Definitely yes. Since you have a monopoly, you may be lethargic in your, or you may be complacent altogether. So inefficiency, complacency over the controls of cost, as the case might be, as what we are looking into it. So before we wind up this particular presentation, let me give you a brief glimpse into what a kink demand curve is all about. It. This is what we will be talking on an y-axis and x-axis slowly and steadily. On the y-axis, let me proceed with price, and on the x-axis let me quote quantities as the case might be. Slowly, if you can look it out, we are planting and plotting the price and the quantity as the case around here. So what is it? This is demand, this is elasticity, right? So when the price is more, the demand will be less. I hope everybody is clear with it. When the price will be more, demand will be less, but when the price is less, demand will be more, as is the case might be. So let us understand what happened on a monetary consideration. This is a point where you can actually make your break-even point, right? Where your pricing and your costing is more or less the same thing. Above this, you will not be looking into it. So you will have a five, or sorry, absolutely for a $5 or £5 and 100 quantities, you can actually have a break-even point at this point of time. This is what the break-even point is all about it. So what can we do? Can we increase that $5 or £5 a little more by $2 or $10, as the case might be? In that case, what happens is my break-even point comes much lesser, probably at the end of $20 is what I'm going to go around it. If I just double it up, it becomes $50, 50 quantities as such. Now this is my new break-even point, right? So this is what been shifted. The number of quantities getting shifted if I increase the price. I hope everybody goes around it. So from break-even point from here, it gets shifted to the less number of quantities. That means quickly I can always reach profitability. Now this is what needs to be understood as a curve is concerned. Now demand becomes inelastic altogether. Absolutely, demand becomes inelastic because I have a price which is quite expensive, probably, but and I have a price which is skimming or penetrating, as the case might be. Now let us have another scenario wherein I will reduce the price of my costing purpose below the cost process. Now what will happen is this kinked in price, my break-even point, if I reduce the price, what will happen? My demand will increase, my break-even point will come somewhere down the corner. This is what it will actually go around it, as the case might be. See what happens, the number of quantities has to be increased. Absolutely. Why? Because we have reduced the price. As logical as the case might be, this is what the break-even point comes around it. Now, remember, this is the king demand curve that comes around. So what am I trying to do it? At the time of introduction, I can keep my price high. At the time of introduction, if there's a new product, new ideas, I keep my price high as a skimming policy, and then my demand, I will quickly attain profitability at the lower scale. And slowly, when people try to copy me up of mimic my product, I will slowly and steadily reduce my price so that to push away the competitions altogether. And this is what a king demand curve is all about it. With this, we come to an end. I believe everything would be looked into it very easily, understood very easily as far the market structure is concerned. I am sure with this, microeconomics is just clear to all of you. Thank you for watching this video.